Welcome to another episode of Good Stories, brought to you by the good, the bad, and the super ugly. For more viral content, endless giveaways, cash opportunities, and more, be sure to visit goodbadsuperugly.com. When Undercover Boss is not staged, the man came into the lobby like a dust storm, his boots leaving a faint trail of the road on the polished marble. The lights hanging from the ceiling were great glowing tiers of glass, and they threw a rich man's light on everything below. But the air grew cold when he approached the counter. The woman behind it, her name was Helen, let her eyes travel from his worn hood to his scuffed boots. Her hand went beneath the counter and found a button. Two men in uniforms appeared at the far end of the hall. She didn't speak loud. There was no need. Her eyes said the words for her. "You are not of this place." The man stood quiet, his hands hanging easy at his sides. In 20 minutes, she would be gone, her name stripped, her little kingdom fallen, and all the eyes that watched now would see it. But no one knew that yet. Not the people sipping their wine in fine coats, not the workers who looked away, not Helen, who allowed herself a small smile as the guards came near. To them, this man was just a wrong thing in a right place. It was a test, and they were all set to fail it. The man's name was John Vale, 38 years old. He had built the Vale Hospitality Group from nothing, a thing now worth more money than most men see in 10 lifetimes. Hotels in 11 countries, trophies on a wall, and an army of workers who wouldn't know his face if they passed him on the street. 2 days before, he had bought the Royal Crown chain through a series of paper companies, quiet, like a thief. The ink wasn't even dry when he booked the best room under a business name. No one in this building knew the man they were set to throw out on the walls around them, the clothes on their backs. That was the point. He didn't want a parade. He wanted the truth. And the only way to get the truth is to walk in like you own nothing and see what happens. Under the old jacket and the tired eyes was the man who had just bought their world. But Helen didn't see it. Nobody did. His assistant, a sharp woman named Marie, had handled the books, rerouted the calls, made sure the front desk wouldn't get a warning. No announcement, no memo, just silence. He'd done this before. There's only one way to know the heart of a thing you've bought. Walk into it blind. The plan was simple. Watch, test, remember. Not as a boss, but as a man. Unimportant, unremarkable, unseen. If a place treats people poorly when it thinks no one is watching, then it is a broken place. This wasn't a visit, it was a trap, and John wanted to see who would fall into it first. He wasn't looking for angels. He was looking for what was real, and the royal crown was about to show him. The jacket was worn thin at the elbows. The jeans were gray with the dust of travel. His pack was an old thing, hanging from one shoulder like it was tired. John did not look like a man who belonged in a $2,000 a night room. He walked through the spinning doors into the light of 1,000 crystals. Right away, heads turned. A low murmur moved through the plush chairs. A man lowered his paper. A woman raised her glass and whispered to her friend. Not a word was said to him, but the message was clear. You are not our kind. John kept walking, his steps firm on the stone. The sound echoed. It wasn't hate he felt. It was something colder. A curiosity dressed up as contempt. This was what he needed. Not the fake smiles for the rich, but the raw, honest reaction to a man they thought was less. He didn't flinch. He took it in. The young man at the counter hesitated, his fingers frozen over the keys. He opened his mouth, not sure if he should say hello or call for help. He didn't get the chance. Helen came in from a side door, her heels snapping on the floor. Her eyes barely touched John before her voice cut the air. "This is a private hotel," she said, her voice cool. "We don't take walk-ins." John looked right at her. "I have a reservation. Under Vale Group." Helen didn't move, didn't check the screen. She tilted her head, like she was looking at a stain on a good rug. There was no yelling, no scene, just a quiet push of her power, and a calm push back from him. But under his steady voice was the first flicker of anger, behind her smile, a cold surety. This man does not belong. She just didn't know how wrong she was. Helen didn't move toward the machine, didn't ask for a name. She folded her arms. "I think you're mistaken." A soft laugh came from behind John. Another guest leaned in to whisper, amused. A third shook his head, smiling into his drink. The tension wasn't loud, it was a slow, creeping thing. John's face didn't change. His voice stayed even. I'd appreciate it if you check. Helen tilted her head again. There's no need. He could feel the room watching, judging, not with heat, but with a quiet dismissal, the kind that says, you have already lost. Go quietly. But John didn't step back. He stood still, not because he needed their okay, but because he needed proof of this very thing. And Helen was giving it to him, word by word. We have a certain standard here, she said, slow and clear. You might be more comfortable somewhere else. The words landed like a slap wrapped in silk. The quiet became a show. A young man in loafers said, just loud enough. He probably just wandered in. Laughter followed, soft, held back, but now a shared joke at John's expense. John didn't answer, not with words, not with his body. His silence wasn't surrender. It was him letting the moment build, letting them show themselves completely. To them, his quiet meant he was beat. To him, it meant he was learning. Every smirk, every turned head, every glance that didn't meet his. This wasn't just about Helen anymore. It was about a whole system that said she was right, and it had just shown its true face. Without a word, John reached into his jacket and pulled out a heavy, black card. He put it on the counter. Centurion. No limit. Invitation only. Helen didn't blink. She gave it a look, then smiled like it was a child's fake coin. Anyone can get a fake these days. A sharp breath went through the room. Even the clerk flinched. Someone let out a low whistle, not laughing, just shocked. The air got tight, like a wire about to snap. John didn't move. His hand stayed by the card. He hadn't come to impress, but he wasn't here to be wiped away either. Helen's words weren't just mean, they were a reveal. She'd seen power and called it a lie. Now he knew. She wasn't making a mistake. She was making a choice. John kept his voice level. I'm asking you one last time to check the system. Helen didn't answer him. She turned, pressed a button, and spoke into the radio. This guest is causing a disturbance. Please escort him out. Her words were short, efficient, like she was noting a spill. The clerk, a young man named Peter, froze. His fingers hung over the keys. He looked at John, then at Helen. His mouth opened, but no sound came out. He felt something was wrong, but the authority was right in front of him, waiting. In the distance, footsteps came, heavy, sure. Security. John's card still sat on the counter. He didn't look at Helen now. He looked at Peter, and in that second, Peter knew. This wasn't about a guest. This was a test, and he was already part of the answer. The elevator dinged. 2 guards came into the lobby, calm, big men. Helen didn't even look. She just pointed. Peter's voice broke the silence, quiet but tight. Sir, are you sure you have a reservation? John turned to him. His eyes didn't show anger, only a cold clarity. I'm sure, he said evenly. Penthouse suite, 3 nights, under Vale Group. Then he added softer, and I'm making a point to remember every face I've seen tonight. Peter blinked. The guards paused, waiting. Helen gave a sharp nod. Peter didn't move. His hand was near the keys, but he didn't type. Something wasn't right. The way the man spoke, the way he stood. A seed had been planted, and in Peter's hesitation, it started to grow. Something here was wrong, and it wasn't the man in the hoodie. The guards moved in, firm, professional. One pointed to the door, the other touched John's shoulder. He didn't fight. He didn't speak. No one in the lobby stepped in. Helen's voice followed him, clear and loud, for everyone to hear. He's pretending to be a VIP. We've had this before. Phones came up. Screens glowed. A few guests shifted for a better view. It wasn't anger. It was a show. Something to go with their drinks. John walked slow, hands easy, posture straight. No shame, no fear, just silence. His eyes moved over the room as he passed. No hate, just memory. A woman near the bar whispered, "That's what happens when you try to be something you're not." And the guard beside John muttered, almost sorry, "Just doing our job, sir." John didn't answer. He was already memorizing the script they were writing for their own end. As John neared the doors, A guest by the fire leaned to his friend and whispered, "Not quiet enough. How'd he get in?" No answer, just a quiet snort. Across the room, a woman in pearls lifted her phone and took a picture. No flash, no shame, just a thing to keep. Helen stood by the desk, arms crossed, watching like a director after a good take. "This," she said, not hiding her pleasure, "is why we have standards." The word standards hung in the air. John kept walking, but he heard it all, every whisper, every click, every smirk, all thinking they were unseen. No one questioned Helen. No one asked if she'd even checked. They didn't need proof. They had what they thought was right, and that was enough. Outside the doors, John stopped under the hotel's gold sign. The night air was cold, but his voice was steady as he put the phone to his ear. "Marie," he said, "get the board on a call, 20 minutes. Send the release." A short silence on the other end. Then he added, calm but sharp, "And make sure someone gets a picture of every face in that lobby." He put the phone away. The shame of it still stuck to him, not from the words, but from the silence that held them, the looks, the ease of it. But he hadn't come for respect. He'd come to see who would fail when they thought they were alone, and they had, easy and public. Now it was his turn, not to rage, to answer with a surgeon's cut. John went back through the spinning doors without a word, leaving only the sound of glass and the faint echo of steps behind. Inside, Helen took a few quiet nods and smug smiles from the guests. An older man shook her hand. "Good call," he muttered. "Can't be too careful." Helen smiled, the winner. But behind the desk, Peter sat still, his fingers now on the keys. He hadn't touched them before. He looked at Helen, then typed, "Vale Group, Penthouse, 3 nights." The reservation came up right away. Confirmed. Corporate. Flagged VIP. Peter stared. His throat got tight. Everything he'd felt was now there in black and white, and he hadn't done a thing to stop it. The mistake wasn't just Helen's. It had a witness, and now it had a record. Peter clicked deeper. Vale Group, executive tier, booked 3 days ago. Note, CEO level. His eyes got wide. He opened a browser and typed, John Vale. The search came back full. News, interviews, Forbes. John Vale, CEO of Vale Hospitality Group, acquires Royal Crown chain. He clicked. There it was, John's face. The same worn jacket, the same calm look. Peter's breath caught. "He's the CEO," he whispered, eyes on the screen. "He owns this place." He looked up, stunned. Helen was still talking to guests like nothing happened, but Peter's world had just turned over. The man they'd thrown out wasn't a nobody. He was the reason they had jobs, and in 20 minutes, he'd be back with the whole world watching. The doors turned again. John stepped back into the lobby. Same jacket, same steady walk, but something was different. Not in him, in the room. A silence fell over the place. Talk stopped. A wine glass hit a saucer too hard and broke. A guest fumbled with a phone, dropped it. Another whispered, "Is that?" Eyes turned. Faces changed. Knowing looks behind the desk. Peter didn't breathe. His voice came out low, almost by itself. "He's back." He came back. John didn't speak. Didn't look at anyone for long. Just walked straight to the desk like it was his floor, his stage. Because it was. And now everyone who had played their part 20 minutes ago would learn what it meant to be seen by the man who held the strings. John walked with a quiet purpose, stopping right in front of the desk. He looked at Peter, not accusing, not cold, just steady. "I believe," he said, his voice calm but clear, "you still have my reservation." Peter swallowed hard. The screen was open. He didn't need to type. He nodded slow. "Yes, sir," he said, his voice shaking. "Penthouse suite, 3 nights confirmed." The words landed like a rock in still water. A couple looked up, confused. Another guest glanced at Helen, waiting. John said nothing more. He didn't gloat. He just took back the space with his presence. The man they tried to erase now stood where they'd refused to see him. And this time, the room couldn't look away. Peter wasn't the only one trembling. Helen's voice cut through the quiet, like broken glass. "What is he doing back in here?" She walked forward, sharp and angry, eyes full of fire. She no longer held John. He didn't look at her. He didn't flinch. Instead, he reached into his jacket, pulled out a simple black business card, and put it on the counter. The silver writing caught the light. John Vale, Chief Executive Officer, Vale Hospitality Group. No words, just a card. Helen stopped. The clerk beside Peter gasped, a quick intake of air. Somewhere a phone dropped. John still didn't look up. His silence said it all. I don't need to argue. I don't need to explain. I just need you to read. And now, Helen was the one being watched. Her face lost its color. Her voice cracked as she reached for a lie. Anyone can print a card. It was weak. Everyone heard it. John, calm as ever, put his phone on the counter, spoke clearly. Marie, put me through to the boardroom speaker. Seconds later, a voice came through the lobby, clean and sure. Mr. Vale, the voice said warm. Welcome to your new flagship. We've been expecting you. The words hung in the air like a judge's sentence. Peter looked down. A guest by the elevator covered their mouth. Another sat down, unsure what to do. Helen stood frozen, her world coming apart word by word. She had questioned the card. She couldn't question the voice. And now, every excuse she had didn't matter. Helen turned slow, looking around like someone might help her, explain this away. No one did. Guests who had nodded at her before now stepped back, phones down, eyes avoiding hers. The same lobby that had backed her now turned away. Behind the desk, Peter let out a breath, like he'd been holding it for hours. Quietly, he leaned to his co-worker and whispered, "We made a big mistake." John didn't look at Helen. He looked at the room. "I didn't come for revenge," he said, voice even. "I came to clean house." No show, no theater, just a clean, sharp truth. He hadn't needed to yell. He hadn't needed to demand respect. He let them choose how to treat him. Now he was choosing what came next. From John's phone, now on the desk, the speaker came alive, loud enough for all. "This is the executive board," a voice said formal. "We are monitoring the situation at the Royal Crown. And yes, the press has it." The room shifted again. The air got heavier. Helen's breath caught. Her hands, once sure, now shook. Her eyes went to the doors, then back to John. He turned to her, tone calm, like a doctor. "Still want to follow the rules?" he asked. "Or shall we make new ones together?" Helen didn't answer. She couldn't. This was no longer a mistake. It was an end, spoken through a box for all to hear, backed by the people who held her future. And for the first time, she knew she wasn't in charge anymore. John didn't raise his voice. He just turned to Peter and spoke clear. "Pull the guest complaints for the last year. Filter by management." Peter hesitated, then nodded, typed and hit enter. A list filled the screen, 17 entries, all tied to one name, Helen Clay. 17. John said, letting the number sit. Helen stepped forward, voice shaky but fighting. "Those reports are lies. Most came from misunderstandings. You can't trust them." John didn't blink. "The 6 payouts." Helen froze. Peter clicked again. 6 settlements appeared, quiet, sealed, dated. "This isn't a pattern," John continued. "It's a habit." The lobby was silent. The numbers were louder than any shouting. No opinion, no guess, just facts. And Helen was standing in front of them, naked, alone, and finally out of lies. From the side, a woman in a housekeeping uniform stepped forward, quiet, hesitant but firm. "She yelled at me once," she said, almost a whisper. "No reason, just because I was there." Helen opened her mouth, but John raised a hand, not to her, but to the room. He turned to the security camera above the desk, speaking not just to those here, but to anyone watching. "If this has happened to you," he said, voice steady, "you're not alone. You're not invisible. Now is the time to speak." A pause. Then one hand went up, then another, a concierge, a valet, a server. One by one, quiet yes. Helen's eyes moved from face to face, knowing, then fear. The silence she had relied on was breaking by the very people she thought would never talk. From near the fireplace, an older woman stepped forward, composed but tight around the eyes. "I had a confirmed suite here last spring," she said. Got a call the morning of saying it was gone for maintenance. But I know why. I didn't look the part. A murmur went through the crowd. Peter typed fast. Reservation history confirms it, he said. Room was reassigned. No maintenance logged. Helen's voice snapped, sharp and defensive. I was protecting the brand. Our image matters. We can't just. John turned to her, not angry, just precise. You're calling it policy? Helen's mouth hung open. Words stuck. What she once called standards now had names, stories, times. And the brand she defended had just become evidence. John finally turned to face Helen full, his voice low but clear, cutting through the fancy air. I used to mop floors, he said, at the first hotel I ever built. Helen blinked, not sure she heard right. I've carried bags, changed sheets, scrubbed toilets. I know this work from the bottom because I started at the bottom. He took a step forward, not to scare, but to be heard. No one gets to say what a man is worth by the leather on his shoes. Quiet settled in, heavy with respect. I didn't buy this hotel to change the lobby, he went on, voice firm. I bought it to change the mind. A pause. And that starts now. The room didn't clap. They listened because leadership isn't a title, it's a truth. You're not afraid to say it out loud anymore. Outside, the first news van pulled up, logo bright, camera crew already moving. Then another. Flashbulbs popped against the hotel's glass face. Inside, staff phones buzzed all at once, alerts. Breaking. CEO John Vale makes unannounced visit to new royal crown. Someone whispered, it's on the news. Another said, it's everywhere. On the feeds, the trend climbed fast. Hashtag Royal Crown Truth. Clips of John being walked out were already up, contrasted now with him taking apart Helen's story. A split screen of power and what comes after. Guests in the lobby looked at their screens, then at the man standing there. This was no longer a hotel problem. This was public. And what had been brushed off 20 minutes ago was now a headline. A word, a reckoning. John stepped forward, his voice now for the whole lobby. No longer quiet. No longer testing. Effective now, he said. All inside rules at the Royal Crown will be public. No more hidden ways. No more protected behavior. He tapped his phone, put it on the desk, spoke into the call. Janet, and the file for Helen Clay now. Send word to legal and all staff. The lobby froze. On speaker, the HR head replied. Understood. Sending. Helen's breath hitched. Her voice cracked as she stepped forward. This is a setup, she snapped. You planned this. But no one spoke for her. The silence was louder than any yell. John didn't answer. He didn't have to. For once, a system that hurt the weak had just turned on the strong. The voice from HR came back, clean and final. Helen Clay's employment is over. Paperwork is signed, timed, and sent to legal, operations, and front desk. At the desk, a young worker hesitated, then reached for the keyboard. With one click, Helen's profile came on the screen. Her name, title, and access were still there. He hovered over a small red icon that said remove, then pressed it. The sound was soft, almost nothing, but in that moment, it held the weight of every ignored complaint, every dismissed warning, every time someone had been made to feel small. Helen stared at the screen. Her name vanished right there. No applause, no fight, just a quiet, final erase. The same system she'd used to keep others out had just shut her out. The lobby stood still, no sounds, no steps, just the feel of a breath held too long. Guests and staff watched John, not like a crowd, but like a jury that had seen the verdict and now waited for what was next. He let the quiet sit, then broke it gentle. We're going to fix this place, he said. From the ground up, not with fear, with decency. He turned to Peter. Their eyes met. You, John said. You hesitated. That means more than people know. Peter stiffened. Unsure if it was a punishment, John added. You might do better than the last one. The words landed with weight and a chance. It wasn't a promotion, not yet, but it was a door. One that opened, not with titles, but with owning up. For the first time that day, hope came into the room. Peter lowered his gaze, voice quiet but clear. "I'm ready," he said, "and I'm sorry for staying quiet when it mattered." John nodded once, not with praise, but with knowing. "You're not quiet now," he said. "That's what counts. No more needed." Outside, the flashing of camera lights started to dance through the windows. Crews had gathered, tripods up, mics out. The building, once a hideout for looks, was now a light for truth. Inside, Peter stood taller, not from pride but duty. He knew the weight of his earlier pause, but he also knew this moment was different. A fresh start, a new chance. John stepped back a little, letting the light fall on the one who had stepped forward. From now on, the world would be watching, and they weren't just watching John anymore. Cameras filled the marble room, their red lights blinking like a heartbeat. Mics reached out from all sides. Reporters called John's name, voices mixing loud. He stepped into the center without rush, no stand, no notes, just presence. "I didn't come here to fire anyone," he said, eyes on the crowd. "I came to keep the people who deserve to stay." Click. Flash. Quiet. Then he added, voice firm but calm. "Power means nothing if it's never tested." The line hung in the air, a sentence not just said but carved. Phones lit up, posts fired, tags changed. Someone near the back whispered, "That's going to last forever." He wasn't just talking to the press. He was speaking to every worker watching from behind doors, every guest still in the corners, and every boss who thought silence was safety. It wasn't, not anymore. A reporter raised her voice from the pack. Mike stretched out. "Mr. Vale, why didn't you say who you were right away?" John didn't wait. "Because I don't need anyone bowing when I come in," he said. "I need them to do right when they think no one's looking." The room went quiet again, not from tension but thought. Behind the desk, Peter stood silent, watching. His eyes didn't leave John's face. Slow, he nodded to himself, no longer from fear but pride. John hadn't just called out a broken system. He had shown what it means to lead without a title, without a spotlight. Real leadership doesn't walk in with a badge. It walks in with humility. And sometimes it starts with a man holding a mop long before he holds a microphone. From the edge of the room, a woman in a housekeeping uniform stepped forward. She moved careful, her hands still in gloves, eyes unsure. She stopped a few feet from John and spoke, just loud enough to be heard. "Thank you," she said, voice trembling, "for doing what no one else ever did." John looked at her, not over her, not past her, just at her. And then, without a word, he gave a small, respectful bow. No big speech, no clapping, just a see. A camera clicked. Then another. The flash lit their shapes for a second, CEO and cleaner side by side, in the same light. That picture would be everywhere by morning. Not because it was grand, but because it was true. In a hotel built on looks, this moment had nothing to prove and everything to say. 1 week later, the news aired a morning piece. John Vale removes manager, announces big changes at Royal Crown. Footage rolled. John's quiet return, Helen's end, and the talk that followed. Back inside the lobby, a new bronze sign was put up near the door. Guests stopped to read it as they passed. In a place once known for judging covers, only those who show respect remain. No names, no brand, just truth. At the front desk, Peter stood behind the counter, tie straight, posture sure. A small pin on his jacket now said General Manager. He didn't boast. He didn't act, but the way he welcomed a guest, a real look, a true smile, said more than any news piece. This wasn't about being saved. It was about taking care. What John had started, Peter now had the chance to carry on. The news piece cut to a now-known clip. Helen mid-fight, face red, voice breaking, as John calmly said she was done. Below the video, words rolled. The cost of attitude online. The clip blew up, over 100 million views in 2 days. Comments flooded. That's how it's done. Finally a CEO who does what he says. She judged the wrong man on the wrong day. The web wasn't mad. It was relieved. In a world full of corporate sorries and half-steps, this stood out because it wasn't made up. It was real. A man shamed for no reason. A system flipped right there. And justice, not whispered but said out loud. Not for the drama, but because someone finally decided that quiet was no longer part of the job. A week later, John sat across from a podcast man in a quiet room. No bright lights, no screens, just a water and a mic. The host leaned in. You didn't have to go in hidden. Most bosses would have sent a note. John shook his head. I didn't do it for the show, he said. I did it so every worker knows someone's watching. But this time the right way. The host paused, thinking, then added, and the guests, they're finally being seen right too. John didn't nod. He didn't need to. The host did, slow, respectful, and for a few seconds, the mic caught nothing but quiet, not empty, just understanding. In a world full of noise, John had said more by doing than most ever do with words. On screen, a handwritten letter faded in, ink soft, edges slightly worn. A calm, middle-aged woman's voice started reading. I've stayed in many fine hotels, but this was the first time I felt not just let in, I felt respected. This place doesn't just have crystals and stone, it has heart. As the words went, the screen showed John walking quiet across the lobby, slow. No big moves, just him passing a bellhop with a nod, stopping to return a smile from a guest. No music, just steps and the soft sound of paper turning. Thank you, the letter ended, for reminding me that kindness can be part of luxury. No tags, no trends, just truth. Some reviews are written online. Others are written in silence by the way a place makes people feel. The lobby had returned to calm. Guests checking in, staff moving with quiet purpose. John stood by the front window, watching the city breathe outside. His helper came near, tablet in hand. So, she asked soft, what's next? He didn't turn, just kept his eyes forward. There are still places, he said, where people think no one's watching. A pause. We're going there next. She nodded, already knowing, already ready. The screen faded to black, then white words appeared, bold and simple. Coming soon, dignity. A soft hum under it. No drama, just direction. Not every fight ends in one building. Not every system changes in a day. But someone somewhere had just been put on notice, and the next lobby was already waiting. The screen fades in quiet. No music, just soft sounds. A new day at the Royal Crown. A bellhop shares a quiet joke with a guest. A coffee server hands over a cup with both hands. A manager listens, really listens, to a worker explaining an idea. Faces of all kinds, languages, accents, smiles that aren't forced. Then, at the bottom corner, a single line appears. Serving isn't about lowering yourself, it's about lifting others. No speaker, just stillness. Then a soft voice, almost like memory. If you've ever been misjudged, if you've ever been told you didn't belong, you're not alone. The screen stays on a porter holding the door for a couple in wheelchairs, both laughing. No hero music, just real people, and a sense that somewhere, someone finally got it right. John walked through the glass doors of the Royal Crown one more time. Same stone floor, same lights, but everything felt different now. As he moved through the lobby, heads didn't turn in doubt. They turned with knowing and quiet respect. Workers nodded, not because of his title, but because of what he stood for. A doorman straightened his coat. The clerk greeted him by name. John gave a simple nod back, no smile, no speech, just presence earned, not taken. Then a last message. Subscribe if you believe respect should come before a business card.
To get more viral content, plus endless giveaways, be sure to visit goodbadsuperugly.com.